name is Kenzie and welcome to a watercolor tutorial. And today we're going to be painting this spring cottage. So keeping with the spring theme, we're going to be sticking with some light washes of our color, but also building up layers as we go. We're focusing on the gradients of a single color. That way we can get lots of depth to our piece. So this right here is my Winsor Newton watercolor paints that I have taken from the tube and put it inside this palette that I got off of Amazon. I have a tapping cloth right here. It's always good to have one. That way you don't have excess water on your page. I also have my 2 water cups right here. One I use for cool paints and one I use for my warmer paint colors. I also have right here my dryer. I like to use this to speed up the process between layers. These are the brushes that I use. These are the silver black velvet. I have size 12, 4, and 8, and these are the round tip brushes. So these are also some other brushes that I like to use as well. If I have a large area like a landscape, I'll typically use this brush. And this oval brush that I have right here is really good for florals and other things as well. So I do like these 2 brushes. I don't use this kind of brush often, but it is good to have if I'm painting bricks or other details in my painting, so I do have this one handy. These 2 items I use all the time. This is called masking fluid. It acts as a cover, so wherever I put this masking fluid, let it dry, I can paint over top, can make sure my painting is 100% dry. I can scrape off the masking fluid and that area will be left untouched. So I use this a lot, but make sure to use an old brush because it does get kind of goopy and you'll end up with a broken brush. I also like to use bleed proof white. This is a very highly pigmented white, which will sit on top of any type of color. I'm using this painting as an example. I always like to have painter's tape on hand. I like to paint down my paintings. It's easier to 1, film, and 2, also just keep everything from moving around and it getting a little messy. It also helps to protect your desk, which you'll see mine is very worn. So it definitely does help with that. Okay, so to get started here, I am going to start by mixing up my colors. I'm going to be mixing up a bit of a cream color. I already have one pre-mixed in here. Just going to use a light brown and a little bit of cadmium red in here as well. I'm going to use a wash, which just means lots of water. And I'm going to start by just shadowing underneath the gutter area in here. Now you're going to want to work fast. You don't want your colors drying out on you. I'm going to get another brush, get rid of everything on it, and I'm just touching that line and I'm blending it out. I'm blending it out until there's nothing. Okay. Now this right here, I'm touching over it while it's wet just to help there just be a little bit more of a blend. So I'm doing a wet on dry technique right here. This is when I am painting a wet surface, which is my brown, onto a dry surface, my page. And again, I'm getting rid of everything on my brush, so it's just water, and I'm blending this out. And the same again, blending it out. I'm going to come down the sides a little bit and blend it. I'm going to shadow underneath this little flower pot. Under my flowers over under here. And dragging it underneath my window. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. Now the next thing I'm going to do is mix up this color that I already have down over here, and I want to add a little bit more red. For the roof, I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow to make it more orange and a lot of brown. And what I want to do is leave a little line right in here. I'm gonna leave this area. I'm gonna give that a sec to dry. Okay, so I'm gonna use a wash now. I'm gonna come towards my top area. I'm gonna drag out a nice wash of my color. And I'm gonna bring it down. And I'm gonna work pretty fast here. I got a good amount of water on my brush, so I'm able to spread out my color. It gives me it nice and light. So keeping in mind here, when you're working with watercolor, you always want to start with a lighter shade first. If you go too dark, it's going to be impossible for you to layer and do really anything with this painting. So make sure you go with your lighter color first. So now that I have that first color down, I can come in while it's wet and touch around different parts. And if it's still nice and wet, it should blend nicely. Like right, this side's nice and wet. This side dried already, so I can just come in and do the same thing with a damp brush and just blend it out. Not a big deal. But this part's still wet over here, so I can come in and shadow nicely. I can even scoop up certain parts over here to create a nice highlight. I want it to be a little bit darker underneath my chimney. Blend out this line over here. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of gray, and I'm going to just shadow under here and underneath my chimney a little bit with that grayish brown color that I just mixed up. And I'm not this dry. It's going to come in and just scoop up a bit of a highlight over here, and I'm going to let that part dry. So I think right now what I want to do is focus on, I'm trying to just think. I'm just going to do a lot of the first layers right in here. So if I was to come in now and do fine lines with my shingles on my roof while it was still wet, it would just bleed and blend like what it's doing over here, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure that it is dry and use that wet on dry technique when we're painting a wet surface with a dry sheet of paper. That's how we get depth and dimension within our painting. I went over my line a little bit, so I'm just going to scoop this up. And wet on wet technique, when we're painting wet surface onto another wet surface, like what we did here with the gray, that's when you get soft blends, and you also get things that appear in the distance. So this is the two top techniques that we use a lot with watercolor. Okay, so I'm gonna mix up a little bit more of that gray color into my brown, and I'm gonna use this now to come around and shadow the inside of my door frame. And I'm gonna grab a little bit more pigment, and I'm just gonna touch it with that wet on wet technique, let that blend out towards the top, and then have the bottom part be a little bit more shadowed, using just water to blend it out. If you're seeing some harsh lines, you can even use a damp brush and scoop up as well certain areas. And I'm going to repeat this in here. And in here. Oops, I went out, so I'm using water to blend that out. I went out of my line. Shoot, I gotta use water now to scoop that up. Okay, using the same color as before, my orangey gray color. I'm gonna come in and blend in here as well. If you hear that running water, I'm doing my laundry. My desk is connected to my desk is in my basement. So it's really hard to get perfect silence down here when I'm right next to the furnace room. Okay, I'm trying to think what else. Let's do the framing around the other windows as well. I try to do a lot of my recording during the day because at nighttime, you know, I have my kids at home, but it's also really hard to find silence. Like usually when my son is napping upstairs, I'm running the dishwasher, doing laundry, and yeah, it's hard to find quiet moments. Okay, and the last one over here, I'm just going to outline this one. I didn't pre-draw the window parts over here. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is fill in the door. I'm going to have that be a little bit more of a darker brown, so it just stands out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be the same color. I'm going to add some gray to that. I don't like that color. Okay, this is more like a natural wood color, so I just mixed my two browns here. I think that's raw sienna and burnt umber with a little bit of gray. And with that brown color, again, starting with a lighter shade, I'm going to come in and apply that color. All the way down. And with a gray color, I can also come in and just apply some shadows as well in my door while it's wet, just to give it a little bit more depth. I'm looking around, see what else I can do. My roof is almost dry. Let me just come in now and just dry it so I can move on. Okay, so I have to mix up a darker color now, so I'm just going to mix it into my gray, the color that I used for the roof. I'm going to mix it into my gray right here. Okay, so I'm going to start with my little shingles. So I'm going to come in and create little roof patterns. I'm just doing messy squares all the way around. Trying to stay somewhat consistent with the size. Oh, I can already see him going a little bit wonky over there. This part I always struggle with. I don't have good eye ratio when it comes to this stuff. I should honestly probably pull out a ruler, but this isn't supposed to look super realistic. This is just a fun sketch of Cottage. Okay, so now what I can come in and do is I can mix up a little bit of a darker shade, mixing up some more red, and in certain spots I can come in and just add another layer to it so it just doesn't look so dull. I can come into my little squares, hit some corners, make them a little bit darker. Blending out harsh lines. Just help bring a little bit more life into some of these. And blending them out. And then when you get to the lighter section over here, you can do it. Just make sure you're using that lighter color as well. You don't have to go so dark. So definitely have a lot more water on your brush. And then coming in with a darker gray as well, and just touching certain points and doing a third layer as well. I'm not touching all of them, just some areas. Okay, I can come back to my roof as well if I want to add some more details to it. So I'm gonna mix up, I actually kind of like this red color. So I'm gonna come in and apply some red in here. I'm gonna let this part dry. I'm gonna come in with this darker red when this is dry to have a little bit more of a shadow. Blend that out. And dry. Actually, I have to do the top. Okay, now I can come in with some fine lines and kind of repeat what I just did. Doing this with some different layers. And just shadowing more on the chimney. Okay, so with this color as well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to use it to shadow right under here. And I'm going to blend it out down the sides. So now I can come in with a wash of this color and apply it more in my house. And you'll see now underneath the area that I shadowed first is automatically a lot darker. Even though I'm putting lots of wash down as well, that first layer will just be darker. which is exactly what I wanted before I put down the second color. And towards the bottom, I definitely want it to be a little bit lighter. I don't want it to be too dark in some areas. Okay. So now for the house part again, I need to just mix up a little bit more of a reddish color. I can come in and finish my little roof area that I have right in here. And for the, this is darker, for the inside of the windows, what I like to do is I like to mix up a bit of indigo, and I can even bring in a little bit of gray, and I like to just touch one side like this, and then I get rid of everything on my brush and I just blend out that line. Get rid of everything on my brush, blend out that line. I like to leave the middle with some white space. I don't like to completely cover it. That way it just kind of looks like there's somewhat of a reflection. So again, I'll do one corner, I'll do another corner, get rid of everything on my brush, I blend it out, and leave the center white from the paper. Coming in one corner, coming in the other corner, get rid of everything on my brush, just touch, 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 leaving my centers. And the second last one, touch, touch, blend it out, leave my center, and last one. And blend it out. Okay, so I have pretty much finished a lot of the layers here with my house. So to me it looks really flat, and I'm definitely going to add a little bit more love and dimension to it. But what I also want to do is I want to make sure that I am putting down my background as well, because that will also give me a good idea of how much detail I want to put into my house. So I'm finished with my first layers. I'm going to come back to it, but I want to have some fun with my background. And I'm going to start with my sky. I want it to be a really nice bright blue sky, but I also want it to fade. So I have my nice blue wash right here. There's a lot of water on it, and I'm going to come around my tree area. I'm going to bring it up just a bit. I'm going to get rid of everything on my brush, and I'm going to blend out that line so it starts to have a soft transition and fade. And you'll see here, I just tapped my napkin a few times. That's because I am just picking up the blue, and I can tell that it's just too dark. I have too much paint on my brush, so I need to come around and get rid of it on my napkin. So you'll see I'm just moving around too much blue, so I have to get rid of it on my napkin. Coming around my house. Using just water, and I'm going to start blending it out. Adding a little bit more blue and a little bit more water just to blend this part out. It's just a little too dull. And blending down here as well. Okay, pretty happy with this. So what I want to do is I want it to look like there's lots of bright flowers that are blooming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by doing some of the baskets down here, and I'm just going to blot around in little circles, just dot, 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 in little circular motions. And I want to do different colors, leaving some white space, not completely covering it. I'm going to come in with some purple now, maybe some smaller blots. This might feel a little awkward, but these flowers, they shouldn't be too big. If they're too big, then it's just going to pull away from the fact that these are supposed to be really small flowers. I'm just going to blot a little bit more red and pinks. Just blotting around now with different colors. Okay, so once I'm happy with how many flowers I have down, I can start mixing up some green. So I just mixed in Hooker's green with sap green. And I can literally just repeat what I was just doing, but this time with the green, coming into different points, adding in some green. And this is for the greenery of the basket. I can come out a little bit of my basket so it just looks like some leaves are dangling down and not like a big circle. And up here, filling in some green. And over here as well. And you'll also see I'm not completely covering everything green. I'm definitely leaving some space, some white space to shine through. Okay, doesn't that look a lot better than what it did before when I only had 1 or 2 flowers down? It felt a little awkward. Okay, so I'm gonna add more depth to it. I'm just gonna give it a minute to dry, and I can move on to the kind of the fun part. This is when your painting starts to come alive. Okay, so I'm gonna do another green over here actually. I'm gonna do some sap green. I'm gonna pull in some cadmium yellow, a nice yellowy greenish color, and I'm gonna use lots of pressure here, and I'm going to blot my first layer of green down, and I'm going to let this section dry. Okay, and I'm going to repeat what I did over here, all the way over here, putting down that first layer of green. I don't like how there's such a defined line right here though. Don't like that. I'm gonna keep going. Blotting. And then for the lawn, I can come in as well and just put down some nice light green as well, going around. and using just water to blend out the harsh lines. So this part's always the fun part for me. I love when I'm able to paint the garden part. I love painting flowers and some fun landscapes and things. So I love being able to get creative with this part. Like the house part, like I like it, but it's, I don't know, lots of shadowing and depth and stuff. But this part right here is a lot more freeing, and I got a lot more enjoyment out of doing the pretty flowers. Okay, so I'm also now going to move on and do a nice light brown color for my first layer of my tree trunk. So the reason why I'm not painting and completing each section as I go, it's just because for me and how I like to paint, I like to just get my first layers down first. I just hope that just gives me an idea of how much depth I want to put down and other things like that as well. I know some people would probably like to finish the house first and then they move on. I like to just throw down my layers and then see how things go from there. And then with this color, I'm going to come down and apply a nice wash down my garden path. Okay, almost done. I'm gonna put some green back here. And over here, I'm gonna put some green. Like there's a big bush in the way. Okay, and I'm gonna have this be flowers, flowers, flowers. Okay, so now I can come in and I can just start adding more layers. I pretty much have everything down that I need to. We're gonna do a lot of the wet on dry technique, just adding more details. I'll start here with the trunk. I'm gonna add some nice shadows to my trunk and tree over here. So the trick here with this technique that we're doing is you wanna make sure that when you're doing this, you're not completely covering the layer that you have down previous. If you do that, you're not going to have the depth that you're looking for. So now I've left my center and I'm starting to have the tree look like it's curved because I left the center and I've just painted the sides. So now I can see that it's starting to kind of curve out. I might do one more layer over here. I just need to decide how detailed I want this painting to be. I'm going to come in and mix a little bit more hooker's green. I'm going to mix in some brown into my green. And I'm going to start on my second layer over on my trees. Again, keeping in mind here, I want to make sure I'm leaving plenty of space for that first layer to shine through. And I'm going to have the outside part of my tree be lighter than my inside part. So I'm going to leave all of this outside nice and light. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to come and do over here at my inked marks right here. This is going to be a nice and dark. I'm going to stop because this is another tree. This is a different part of the tree. So up here, it's going to be nice and light. Okay. And I'm going to have under here darker as well. Okay. More hooker's green and more gray. And right in here, I'm going to add a little bit more, keeping in mind I don't want to completely cover that second layer I've just done. Not shadowing that second layer, letting that shine through. And I'm just using a nice blotting technique down here. Work on the little bush down here. Okay, I'm gonna leave these ones in the center a little bit lighter just because I do want to put some flowers in my trees. Just gonna put a little bit of depth right in here. Just a bit. Okay, that looks pretty good so far. I'm gonna come in, maybe just add one more layer into the sides of my tree here. Blending it out with some water. Leaving my centers. I'm gonna come in and fill out these lines right here for my ink marks. Coming down underneath my steps, did a darker line, and now I can come in with just water and blend out this line so I can just shadow right underneath where the steps are. Add a little bit of shadow, I think, around my step area as well. Blend this out. Okay. I'm just gonna create a little bit more darkness in some of these corners as well. So I'm gonna do some more lines under here. I'm gonna use just water touching the edge of this line. I'm gonna blend it out just so this arch has a little bit more dimension to it. Doesn't look so flat. Just add a little bit more darkness into this window as well. And I'm gonna add some darkness in here as well. Come in this corner in here and just add a little bit of darkness. Underneath my door area, I can add some nice designs for the natural wood. Do some lines. I can even freehand a little bit of a handle. As well. do want there to be a little bit more shadow underneath these steps. Still just not completely happy with how these are turning out. It's a little too flat, so I'm going to come in with some nice brown and fill out this step area. Okay, underneath my steps, I'm going to add a little bit more of a shadow as well, some depth. I think it's the house. I think I want to add some more depth to my house. I want to mix up a little bit of gray with the roof color as well. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some shadow right underneath. Kind of what I already did before. I just don't like that it's just not darker. I'm just going to blend it out with some water. Okay, I'm going to dry this. And I'm going to come in right underneath and freehand some more details that would be underneath the roof area. I'm going to grab some more of my red. Shadow more in here, my roof. Shadow more in here, my roof. So when you're doing this part, you do not want to scrub over too much. If you do that, you're just going to get rid of all of the lines that you already have put down. So I definitely wanted to shadow, but I don't want to be scrubbing at what I have already down. Okay. Just come in and just add just a little bit more color to these areas. I'm gonna do some more definitive lines right here. I don't have the sturdiest hand, so this part just kind of scares me, to be honest. Where I'm outlining, definitely a bit nervous. So I'm outlining the outer part of my window ledges. Outlining the window of my door. With a wash of color, I can come in and just add again some details to my wooden door. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to do. I think I'm just gonna add a little bit more brown to my brush for a sec and just add some details to this part right in here. I'm gonna blend out that color with just some water. That's too dark. I'll blend that out. And I'm just going to do some lines in the shutters as well. Okay, so I think now what I want to do is just add a little bit more love to my garden. I have to think about some colors that I'd like. I'm going to do some cadmium yellow, sorry. I might just add a little bit of red to it so it just looks a little bit more peachy. It's a lot of water. Okay, so it's basically now just kind of repeating what I did. So I have little circles that I've already outlined for you guys. Just come in and just do some blots around certain areas, but make sure when you're doing this, you are not completely covering everything. You're leaving some white space in your paper. And white space, again, is just when you are just leaving blank spots in your paper. This with watercolor really does help with some depth and dimension. So I'm just going to fill in some flower shape petals. I'll even come in with a more reddish tone. Just some areas to give it a little bit more depth and visual appeal, that the flowers just aren't all the same color. I'm going to do some flicking shapes over here. So the reason why this might feel strange and tricky is because you're painting the illusion of a flower. Like, you're not actually painting realistic flowers. And for some people, that can be hard. That can be really tricky to actually do because it feels so foreign. Like, you want to sit here and you want to paint the roses or the tulips or whatever it might be. But in actual fact, for this type of loose watercolor, you're actually just painting the shapes of them ish. You're not fully committing to painting these shapes. So I totally understand if you're just like, I don't understand this. I was definitely like that as well when I started with watercolor. Now I'm painting what looks like some tulips. Some loose interpretations of tulips. I'm going to do some tulips over here too, I think. Okay, so now what I can do is I can come in with some green. And I can come in and just add some little leaf shapes and stems in my garden. I can even blot around a little bit with my garden. I have different shades of greens as well. So I'm really looking for where there's some white space. I also don't have to go quite as dark here. I don't know why I went so dark. I can do some flicks. Just gonna add a little bit more of a separation here with this garden bed and this one right in here. Just add a darker green real quick. I'm gonna do that over here as well. Make the garden bed defined a little bit more. And then when this color is dry, I can come in and just make sure I'm leaving that first layer to shine through, but I can add some darker tones to it. I added some purple and some gray to this red. On the corner, it's a little bit darker. Underneath can be a little bit darker as well. Okay, now I can mix up a bit of a darker green as well, so I don't have to just go with the same shade of green. I can come in and do more flicks in here with that different shade of green. I can paint some flicks over top this bush. I'm gonna come in with a smaller brush, I think. My small brush. I can come in and touch my centers with some nice bright yellow. I'm gonna mix a little bit of indigo into my blue as well, just to really darken it up, and add more little streaks over here. Add some darker tones to my garden as well. Some shadows in my garden. I can do some little stone shapes for my path. I'm using the very side of my brush with like a lot of water, and I'm just going to do some rough stone shapes. I can maybe just do a little bit more shadows where my windows are. I can bring in a little bit of a darker green on these flowers. I'm going to add more indigo, actually, more sap green, more gray. So you'll see it's really just the same technique over and over again. It's just applied in just different ways. I'm gonna add a little bit more of darkness on this part over here. else I want to do. Oops, it's too yellow. Just gonna blend this out. I think for just having some loose watercolor cottage building, I think this is pretty good for where I'm at. If I wanted this to be more realistic, we could just keep going and just adding more to wet on wet, wet on dry details. But I think for the purpose of today's painting, I think, you know, we're just making sure each layers are drying as we're going. We're trying to just be a little patient here. We can get creative with some of our small lines and just giving the illusion that they're flowers, even though we're just painting rough shapes of them. Things like that. I'm gonna add a little more green. So I hope you learn a few things about the wet on wet, the wet on dry technique, making sure that we're layering and taking the time to let things dry before we're able to just add any more shapes. I hope you had fun. I'd love to see what you've created, and happy painting, friends.